Tim Allen may be well known to you from his roles in That Unforgettable Grunt. But here's something you probably didn't expect. He has a big beef with one of his co-stars, even though he acts friendly and funny on screen. Someone Tim Allen had worked with for a long time made him very angry. Who could it be? It's not who you think it is. Their relationship went from being stable to very unstable very quickly. They had a lot of trouble communicating, being honest with each other, and doing well at work. Still interested? Find out more about the interesting relationship between Tim Allen and the co-star he never got along with. Tim Allen gets along with everyone, at least almost everyone. Hollywood has a lot of well-known ties. Some of them are real and some are just nice tricks. But have you ever thought about what happens when two actors don't get along? It was said that Tim Allen had one co-star he couldn't stand, even though he was one of the nicest actors in the business. Don't get me wrong, Allen has made some great friends during his long career. Let us take a look at Hanks. Even though they recorded their Toy Story lines at different times, they don't dislike each other at all. If Woody and Buzz can get along in real life, anything is possible. Then there's Nancy Travis, who is his last man standing wife. Allen once joked that because they got along so well, they had a great marriage without all the hard parts. Don't forget Richard Karn and Al Borland, who works with him on home improvement projects. And because they were so close, they got back together for the History Channel show Assembly Required after many years. Which of these good friends did Allen not get along with as a co-star? Why did they work together in such a bad way? The story is about to get interesting, so don't leave yet. What happens when a stand-up comedian ends up being the star of a hit TV show? Things don't always go well. It took a lot of work for Tim Allen to become famous as Tim the Toolman Taylor. People like Tim Allen. He used to do stand-up comedy in clubs late at night, and now he hosts a show during prime time. It wasn't an easy change, and let's just say that not everyone on set found his stress as funny as the crowd did. Think about being in charge of everything on stage and having to work with writers, producers, and a bunch of kids who play parts. Allen thought it would be fun, but he had a hard time getting used to the change. Also, the goal of making Home Improvement a hit made him take things very seriously, sometimes too seriously. Afterward, Patricia Richardson, who played his on-screen wife Jill Taylor, said that behind the scenes things could get tense, even though they got along great on screen. Tim loved the show a lot, but that love came across as strong at times, and it wasn't always easy. This means that you knew when Tim had an idea. Allen was pretty sure of what was funny and wouldn't hold back when something didn't work. Someone who used to write said Tim knew exactly what worked. If a joke didn't work, you'd find out right away. This was funny, but it might not have been so good for keeping the peace at work. There were people who liked how straight he was, and people who probably wished he would learn to meditate. Allen's influence grew as the show did well. He was now in charge, not just the lead player. Some people didn't like how much power he was getting, but his skills made Home Improvement a huge hit. There were times when the writers didn't agree with the star. When a comic starts writing new stories, you know things are getting interesting. It's true that these early fights were just warm-ups. The real trouble wasn't over yet behind the scenes. Allen's patience would be put to the test. He would become a better boss, and one of his relationships at work would get worse than ever. But don't give up yet, because this story isn't over. Have you ever thought about what happens when the cast of a hit TV show becomes famous all of a sudden? There were many great TV shows in the 1990s. Let us talk about Fixing Up Our Homes. Not everything was easy for Tim Allen behind the scenes, even though his family seemed perfect. Everything changed because of the show. He quickly went from telling jokes on stage to being the star of one of the best shows in America. This helped him get roles in movies like The Santa Claus and Toy Story, which became worldwide hits. If things are going well, though, chaos can appear out of nowhere. Imagine being young and seeing your face on every magazine cover all of a sudden. That was the truth for Jonathan Taylor Thomas. He became well known right away, as did his brothers in real life, Zachary Ty Bryan and Taron Noah Smith. A lot of letters and pictures of them in teenage beds were sent to JTT. I think there were more pictures of them than of the Backstreet Boys. The young star's plans were soon full of movie roles and other gigs, though. Fame opened up new doors. Tim Allen had worked hard for years to become famous, and he felt bad about it sometimes. A team member says he told them these kids don't know how lucky they are. Teenagers getting chances was like seeing someone win the lottery on their first try. He had worked hard for years. As the show went on, cracks appeared. Artists' lives change when they get voiceover jobs, movie roles, or TV show roles. Allen was totally into Home Improvement, but some of his co-stars were interested in bigger things too. Also, let's be honest, who wouldn't want a big job in Hollywood? Behind the scenes, this change caused some trouble, especially between Allen and a co-star who wanted to try something new.
One person seemed to be really into a group project, while everyone else was making plans for their next big thing. The home improvement family didn't look like a close family from the outside. Let's be honest, it wasn't all family dinners and chats over the back fence. As the seasons went on, people's personalities clashed and plans went awry. It's hard to keep up with work that used to feel like a dream. So was home improvement doomed from the start? Or is this just how hit shows end? It's likely that there would have been some confusing tweets and passive-aggressive Instagram stories back then. A lot of the time, what goes on behind the scenes is more interesting than what we see on TV. Ever watch a show and think, this is too good to be true? What's going on behind the scenes? Things weren't as fun as they seemed on Home Improvement. Even though the actors got along so well on screen, trust me, there were some very serious moments behind the scenes that made it look like they weren't. Alan was a legend, but he also had clear ideas about how each scene should go. He was also the most beautiful person in the world. If a joke didn't work, they would do it over and over again. One director said that Tim had a plan and would make them keep going until the joke really hit home. It sounds like dedication, but it's also hard work. It would be strange to be on set and wonder, is this the 10th or 21st take? The writer's room is where Tim changed his mind about what the show should be as his power grew. If a plot didn't fit with his ideas, the writing was thrown out. One writer said that Tim didn't like any of the drafts, so they had to be redone. It would be terrible to work hard on something for hours, only to have it thrown away because someone wanted something different. No need to worry, right? But it wasn't just the writers and crew who were hot. Off-screen, the group was having their own problems, even though they seemed like a great close-knit family. Patricia Richardson, whose real name is Jill Taylor, said that they didn't always talk to each other, even though they looked like the perfect TV family. It sounds like everyone is ready for a family get-together. Sometimes they got along like old friends, and other times they just did their jobs and left. People who watched Home Improvement didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. They saw the laughs, the great times with family, and the never-ending projects to make the house better. But there were problems at work, disagreements about ideas, and a relationship that finally broke down for good. The next time you watch a show, ask yourself, what's going on behind the scenes that I'm missing? Trust me, it's always more interesting than what you see on TV. Tim Allen's co-stars started talking about what went on behind the scenes a few years after the show ended. We learned that working with Tim wasn't always as easy as the family show made it look. Want to know what went on behind the scenes? Follow me. This is Patricia Richardson, who played Tim's wife on TV for 8 years. She is the nicest of the bunch. In an interview in 2020, she said that they got along great most of the time, but things did get tense sometimes because Tim's intense about his work, which means he takes his job very seriously, which can be awkward. She quit before the 9th season because of it, even though there was a big pay gap. Pat still stood up for Tim. He made me laugh every day, she said, adding that he had flaws but was never rude. Tim worked hard to make the show great. Was he also a bit of a drama queen behind the scenes? Then there's Casey Wilson, who worked with Tim on the Santa Claus. That's a 1A. Casey's experience was very different. She wasn't hiding the fact that she thought her time with Tim was the worst she'd ever had with a co-star. Oh no, she remembers him telling her she was crossing his lines and being rude and dismissive while they were together. She said it hurt a lot because he talked to her like I was the helper and not another player. What did Tim really look like? Was he just mad that day, or had we never seen that side of him before? Richard Karn, who played Al Borland, had a better opinion. He and Tim have worked together for a long time, and Karn likes how honest Tim is, even if it doesn't always come in a nice package. Tim always lets you know where you stand, he said. Tim may not have been giving praise like candy, but you always knew where you stood with him. There was also Jonathan Taylor Thomas, better known as JTT, who never talked about his time on Home Improvement after he was done. Other former child stars talked about the good old days, but JTT never did. Could there have been problems between him and Tim that they didn't talk about? Or did JTT just want to be left alone to do the things he loved, like becoming the biggest star of the 1990s? What's really going on here? Were these problems just part of the job, or is there a lot more to it than those well-planned family times? Working with Tim Allen was never easy, unless you count the awkward silences every once in a while. But here's the thing, as his fame grew, so did the number of projects he was working on. He played young Simba in The Lion King, and acted in movies like Tom and Huck. Jonathan would sometimes come to work completely worn out from other jobs, which Tim didn't like at all. Imagine being the star of a show, and your co-star passed out in the middle of a scene. That would make you a little mad. By season 7, the stress was almost too much to handle. Tim used to say things like he's so talented, but now he says things like I hope he doesn't burn out before he's 20. In fact, Tim said this about Jonathan in an interview in 1997, the kid's going to burn himself out before he's 20. I remember where he began. When Jonathan told the producers he wanted to cut his role in season 8 in half so he could focus on school, things really heated up. This was an insult to Tim, whose whole job depended on home improvement. You put your whole heart and soul into something, and then your co-star says, "Hey, I need a break to focus on school." That must hurt, right? When Jonathan quit the show for good in 1998, it was clear that things were no longer going as planned. Randy, one of his characters, was written off when he went to Costa Rica to study the environment. What sounds like a classy way to leave, it turned into one of the most talked about endings on TV. What happened? Why did Tim and Jonathan go from getting along like father and son to having a full-on Cold War? Was it the stress of fame or desire, or was it just having too many people to cook for? Whatever the reason, it wasn't the happy ending we were hoping for in this TV dad-son relationship. Tim Allen wasn't afraid to talk about Jonathan Taylor Thomas's departure as the last season of Home Improvement got closer. He threw major shade at a co-star, but many of his fans took what he said about loyalty and commitment as a jab at her. He told TV Guide, "It's a shame when someone who's been a part of a family walks away." But Tim didn't exactly say "good job, kid" when he heard about Thomas's schoolwork. "Party, school is important, but so is honoring your commitments," he stated. Okay, but was Tim mad that Jonathan had moved on, or just sad that Jonathan had? Things got more complicated when Thomas starred in the movie I'll Be Home for Christmas, which came out around the same time he would have been filming Home Improvement. What did Tim do? Let's say he was upset. Jonathan was using school as an excuse to do other things, so he wasn't sure if he was interested or not. He said it was about going to school, but then he did some films. He said, "'Cause I wasn't sure," I asked, "Did he want to make movies or go to school?" Tim didn't seem to believe it, but was he being honest? Or was Jonathan really living out his childhood dream of becoming a TV and movie star? It was a big surprise when Jonathan didn't show up for the last Home Improvement episode. Play music that makes you feel things. People who knew Jonathan, like Zachary Ty Bryan and Taryn Noah Smith, came back to say goodbye, but everyone felt Jonathan's loss. This was how Tim really felt, because he liked watching the show with his whole family. "You'd think he'd want to return and say goodbye," he said. Did these events end their relationship for good, or were they just the cherry on top? Between the father and son, things were not as close after Home Improvement ended in 1990. Tim felt cheated at work and in his personal life because he had put everything he had into the show. Following years, the split was clear, but not in the way that most well-known fights are. There were no fights in public or on Twitter. It was very quiet. Interviews and "I miss you, man" moments didn't happen. There was a strange, empty silence. Where did Jonathan and Tim go? We all loved and knew them. Are they not being loyal because they want power, or is it something deeper that we'll never fully understand? I guess we'll never know. There was no sign of Jonathan Taylor Thomas after the last episode of Home Improvement aired. He was like Houdini in that way. There were no events or interviews in Hollywood, and nothing was in the news. What did really happen? Did he hide away and live a quiet life, or was there something else going on? Tim Allen didn't try to hide the fact that he wasn't happy about leaving so quickly, though. When reporters asked Allen about his ex-TV son, he gave answers that were so short they could fit on a post-it note. At a press event for Toy Story 2, a reporter once asked him about Jonathan, as if he had just stepped into a puddle. He quickly changed the subject and said, "We don't keep in touch." Allen, did you really think that? It happened more than once. Not at all, it became popular. When Thomas was brought up in interviews, Allen either changed the subject or said, "I'd rather be anywhere else." What about Jonathan, though? He didn't talk much either. He only showed up sometimes, and when he did, he talked about school and his plans. He never brought up Home Improvement or his friendship with Allen. In fact, when asked directly about Allen in an interview in 2003, he only said, "We had a professional relationship." The standard "I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole" answer was given, with no reason or "we had a disagreement." At the 2009 TV Land Awards, there was a Home Improvement party, but Thomas wasn't there. Allen said Jonathan has his own life now. When asked about his co-star who wasn't there, he sounded like he said, "And I don't really care what that life is. What's going on?" Allen was friendly with people from the show, like Richard Karn and Zachary Ty Bryan. So why did he act so cold about it? Could it be that they fought more than we were told? The question, who will break the silence first, was asked over and over again for more than 10 years. Because Allen is so loyal, it's clear that they had a bigger fight than just disagreeing on set. He never called Thomas names in public, but people who knew him say he was much meaner to Thomas when they weren't together. It hurts. What did Thomas do to break the trust? Allen had to be really upset because he thought this wasn't just a normal fight at work. Then there's the whole thing about changing jobs. After Home Improvement, Allen's career took off with movies like Toy Story and The Santa Claus. Thomas, on the other hand, stopped playing to focus on school and other interests. We should talk about going in different directions. So could these job choices have been the last thing that made them break up? Why was everyone so stressed?
Maybe it was because they had different ideas about how to live and work. One thing is for sure, it's not your typical Hollywood thriller. Tim Allen didn't do anything else after Home Improvement ended in 19... After that, he played Buzz Lightyear in the Toy Story movies and was in the follow-ups to The Santa Claus. He came back in a big way with Last Man Standing in 2011. Whenever you tried to find Tim Allen, he was busy with something great and new. For more than 30 years, he only worked in show business and made good money. Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who was in the movie with him, chose to go the other way. He turned down the chance to stay in Hollywood and went straight to Harvard. After that, he moved to Columbia to study philosophy and history. You read that right. He put down the red carpet to write books. He didn't play as many roles and went to school and spent time alone. That time, people who watched Home Improvement might have thought, wait, what? Why would someone quit a job like that? To be honest, I'm still not sure. Tim Allen was one of the many people who didn't get Thomas's move. Allen had made a name for himself in the entertainment business for years by getting steady gigs and a lot of attention. However, Thomas wasn't after being filmed by cameras and reporters. He had another goal in mind. He was eager to discover more and not hear another Hollywood tale. Allen, who used to be a comedian before he became famous on TV, couldn't understand it. This is where things get interesting. During an interview for Last Man Standing in 2011, Allen said, "I still don't understand walking away from a successful career to go to school. That's just me though." This was a simple comment, but it showed that Allen still didn't get why Thomas would choose the quiet life of a student over the spotlight. Because these two guys used to be famous together, why did they end up going in such different directions? Allen and Thomas really did not have the same view of life or work. Allen stayed in show business, but Thomas quit to do something that would make him happier on his own terms. It was hard for them to understand each other, let alone get along, because they had very different goals. When your goals are so different, how can you agree on something? Having someone who likes veggie burgers and someone who likes steak at the same dinner table would not work. This whole thing showed how different they had become over time. There was one about show business and one about becoming a better person. It makes sense that they never again met up in the same way. It's the old saying, you do you, I'll do me. But this time the two people are famous on TV. In 2013, Jonathan Taylor Thomas showed up on Last Man Standing out of the blue. He hadn't been on TV in almost 15 years. Fans were naturally thrilled. Could this be the long-awaited reunion between Tim Allen and his Home Improvement co-star? They hadn't been seen on TV together in over 10 years, and let's be honest, no one thought this would ever happen again. Thomas is the owner of a diner on the show, and Allen's character hires her daughter. How do they work together in real life? That's great. There wasn't any strange stress or silence, but what takes place behind the scenes?
That's cool. On the set, people say they were friendly, but not really best friends. They weren't just hanging out with old friends during breaks. What was going on? Someone on the crew said, "Ouch, they seemed too busy with work to talk about the past." Was there more to it than that? Allen was asked nicely if he would work with Thomas again. Even though he said Thomas was smart and a great actress, he didn't go on and on about how great it was that they were back together. He told Yahoo TV, Jonathan went to college and found other things he liked. It means he did great on the show, but that's not the main story of his life. Allen was calm for the cameras, but was there tension between them that they weren't saying? Thomas came back to Last Man Standing a few more times after that. In 2016, he led the direction of an episode. Some people said that they never felt like father and son again, even though this made it look like they could work together. As one author put it best, they worked well together, but there was always this sense of history in the air. It's like seeing an old friend and acting like everything is fine, but you both know there's something weird you'd rather not talk about. What was going on? There was a party between them. Was it a sign that they were going to forget about the past, or was it just a business nod to the good old days? Fans who were hoping for a sad or exciting moment might have been a little let down. It looked more like a friendly handshake than a hug and a deep talk about the past when they tried to get along again. It's a good thing they didn't throw pies at each other. That's progress. Let's talk about Jonathan Taylor Thomas and Tim Allen now. On Home Improvement, these two guys made a great comedic team, but then they ran into a big problem. The fight between Tim and Jonathan over Jonathan's leaving the show is one of the most talked about events in Hollywood right now. Also, it looks like Tim was hit harder than we thought. He didn't just ignore it, he asked Jonathan directly why he was leaving, which was the right thing to do. No way, right? Even after the show was over, Tim couldn't help but say some shocking things. But with everyone else on set, he kept things pretty calm. He seemed proud to hold on to his anger at times. But they have worked together before.
Tim and Jonathan worked together again after a long time, but where was the magic from their home improvement days? Things aren't quite right again. People who have seen them together say it's polite, but their relationship doesn't feel as warm as it used to. It's crazy that this happened between a child actor who was growing up on set and a star of an adult show. Why did Tim not understand why Jonathan wanted to do something else? A lot of people thought Jonathan's reason for leaving was not very good. All of this anger and drama has created a storm that won't go away. These fights between Tim Allen and his co-stars are by far the most well-known. The big question is whether that's something that can be let go of or whether we're all just holding on to old things. Which part with Tim Allen do you like best? Leave a comment below to tell us what you know. Thanks for looking at it.